Right now, as we speak, a really high-stakes U.S. naval blockade is active in one of the world's most critical waterways, the Strait of Hormuz. This is a super tense military situation with huge global implications. So we're going to unpack exactly what is happening, why it's happening now, and the two very different ways this whole crisis could go.
Okay, let's start with what might be the most jaw-dropping fact from the Pentagon's first report. 0. That's right. According to U.S. Central Command, that's exactly how many commercial ships have managed to get through the blockade in its first 24 hours. This tells you right away this isn't just a warning shot, it's a sign of just how serious and effective this operation is from the get-go.
So, why does this one specific spot matter so much? Well, the Strait of Hormuz isn't just some random bit of ocean. It is, and this is no exaggeration, the world's most vital energy transit point. You can think of it as the main artery for the entire global oil supply. So yeah, controlling this little bottleneck gives you an incredible amount of leverage over the world economy.
And this blockade is already having a real measurable impact. I mean, in that first day alone, U.S. naval forces intercepted and ordered 6 merchant ships to literally turn around. They were trying to get to Iranian ports, and they were stopped cold. The rules of this thing are being enforced big time.
So what kind of muscle does it take to create such a tight seal? Well, we are talking about a massive deployment here. This operation involves somewhere around 10,000 U.S. military personnel. You've got sailors, Marines, airmen, and they're all backed by the firepower of more than a dozen warships and dozens of aircraft. It's a serious show of force.
Let's dig into the actual rules of engagement here. U.S. Central Command has been really clear that this is a targeted action. It is strictly aimed at ships either going to or coming from Iran. Now, for every other ship out there, the U.S. says it's business as usual, that they still support freedom of navigation. But, and this is a big but, within that targeted zone, they describe their military control as absolute.
And this brings us right to the heart of the conflict, because you have two completely different ways of looking at the exact same event. The U.S. is framing this as a necessary way to apply pressure after diplomatic talks fell apart, but Iran, they're condemning the whole thing in the strongest possible terms, calling it an act of piracy. Two totally different realities.
So you might be wondering, how on earth did we get here so fast? Well, the timeline shows it was a lightning-fast escalation. Just last weekend, these high-level talks between the U.S. and Iran and Islamabad failed. Immediately after that, President Trump gave the order for the naval blockade. And by Tuesday, boom, it was fully up and running. That's an incredibly quick move from the negotiating table to military force.
You know, the official language being used is just as intense as the action itself. The president issued this very direct, very harsh order to the U.S. Navy. He said he wants them to eliminate any Iranian vessels that harass American ships. Now, language like that, it just doesn't leave much room for error, and it really raises the risk of a dangerous miscalculation.
But then, just as things seem to be heading in one clear direction, you get a surprising twist. On the very same day the blockade started, the president gave an interview and hinted that something could be happening back in Pakistan. It was this little glimmer of hope, suggesting that maybe diplomacy isn't totally off the table. It's a really confusing mix of confrontation and possible reconciliation.
So, when it comes down to it, why does a standoff in the Strait of Hormuz matter to the rest of us? Well, it boils down to two huge things. First, this is already sending major ripples through the global oil markets, and that affects prices for everyone. And second, military experts are warning that this kind of pressure cooker situation dramatically increases the odds of a direct military fight.
And that brings us to the fundamental question that's hanging over this entire crisis. Everything we've looked at, the failed talks, the show of force, those contradictory signals, it all funnels down to this one choice between two very different paths: diplomacy or confrontation. So where do we go from here?
Here are those two possible futures laid out. Path number 1 is a return to the negotiating table. We've heard hints from both sides that they might be open to more talks. But path number 2, and it's a very real possibility, is escalation. The longer this military standoff drags on, the greater the risk that one wrong move, whether it's an accident or on purpose, could spark a direct conflict.
So this leaves the entire region and really the whole world on a knife's edge. The situation is completely caught between this faint hope for peace and the hard reality of military force on the water. As everyone is watching this unfold, it all comes down to one critical question. Which one is going to win out, the diplomat's word or the warship's might?